Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Prep Life Podcast. This is your founder and CEO of Glam Girl Bikini, Amy Enger. And today I'm joined by two fabulous people. First, my co-host, Leemarie Hostetter. Hey, Lee, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Amy.
And we have the special privilege of having IFBB professional Jason Theobald in the house. Thank you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So, can you tell our audience? I know you've kind of rebranded a little bit with
Sure.
your company. You've been around for a long time. So, can you give us a little bit of your background and what you do?
Sure. Um, well, I own Scooby Health. We're a company of about 17 coaches strong now. We mainly, well, we do it all, but a lot of people come to us for functional health issues when they want to find the root cause of really what's going on. But we also do still contest prep and all those different things too. Um, And then I also co-owner of New Ethics, and then also hormone replacement and anti-aging clinic, Advanced Vitality, HRT. So those are the main things that I have my hand in, and then I have my university where I educate coaches, and that's Scooby U. So it's kind of a little bit of everything I do, and then I still compete on some years I compete, some years I don't. But yeah, I just recently competed and did pretty well in the
Yeah, tell
Masters.
us about that. What shows were those then?
Okay, so I did the Tampa Pro, which is a pretty big show. I think there's about 20 guys in my class. I got first there. And then I did Worlds, another big show in the Master Circuit, and I got second. So it came up a little
Yes.
short there, but it was still good placing. And so now I'm qualified for the Masters Olympia in Tokyo next
Yeah.
year. And if you win that, you get a ticket to the actually Rio. So we'll just see how it goes. But there's a lot of good bodybuilders out there. But yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, and you've always competed. Well, first of all, our listeners that don't know, you compete in classic
I do.
physique, and you used to just do open, right? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's not far, but I mean, it wasn't that far ago. 2021, I did open. I got fifth in the
yeah,
open in San Antonio. I've been as close as second in 2018, which was one spot from actually going to the main Mr. Olympia.
yeah,
So, I think if I find a smaller one, I probably could still pretty good in the open, but I did the open in Tampa and I got like third call out. I mean, it was like 24 guys. And I mean, these young bucks are pretty damn big. They just keep adding more and more weight to the class. So I'm
yeah,
yet to decide if I want to keep chasing it at 46, the actually adding weight. But yeah, so it's still fun and exciting to me. So
yeah. Congratulations on that. Yeah,
appreciate it.
so I just feel like you're kind of like the master guru when it comes to hormones and kind of all of that. So we wanted to kind of open this up with, kind of talking about cortisol and the impact that that could maybe have on specifically our listeners are mostly competitors. So there's a lot of things in prep that can cause that. I know
Yeah,
you've talked about like hormone cascade, like weight loss
definitely.
resistance.
Yep.
You kind of tell us a little bit about that and
Sure. Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
big thing, but
Yeah. So I mean, first and foremost, cortisol in and of itself isn't bad. No, there's no bad hormone. It really just comes down to backups of these hormones or overproduction due to lifestyle. And so cortisol, we actually really need it. It helps regulate blood pressure, blood glucose, keeps inflammation down. So it's not a bad hormone, but when it is bad is when, we were meant to have a spike, and then run from the tiger or deal with the burn through the energy that releases. And we'll talk about that energy release because it's very important to understand what's going on there.
Mhm.
And then, we burn through it and then we go back to parasympathetic and chill. Our lifestyle really isn't that anymore. And then you add on hard training, cardio, and then maybe people under eating, it can become a big issue. And so I think you need to understand, when someone says, "Oh, my cortisol's up," and the belly's starting to gain more weight, or I can't lose weight, we got to really understand what else is happening. When cortisol is up, you've got other hormones that are releasing norepinephrine, epinephrine, and these signal to the pancreas to release something called glucagon. And glucagon tells the liver to basically dump in sugar. We need this right now. So it converts triglycerides over to sugar, and now you're dumping sugars. And so when cortisol's stuck up, norepinephrine signaling, glucagon signaling, when you're dumping those sugars constantly, now you've got what? Insulin signaling. And so now you've got insulin constantly in the bloodstream. And we know you don't lose fat as well when insulin's signaling But we also know when you're constantly calling for sugars, you're not going to be tapping into fat as well.
Mhm.
So that is really, what is at play when you're constantly stuck in a sympathetic state. And, if you don't take the right rest, you don't take the right deloads, you don't learn to kind of manipulate this, you can really get in a position where your body just becomes kind of stuck and it's constantly signaling, you're constantly dumping sugar. And then it's like rolling a snowball up a hill against someone pushing down. It's very difficult to lose fat. And then, if you push too much, you start hollowing yourself out from the inside. And actually, your body is smarter than you. It'll convert those amino acids into those sugars that your body keeps wanting. And now you're literally, yeah, the scale might be going down, but your pictures aren't looking any better. Well, that's bad. Now your BMR is dropping. And this is when we get into the weight loss resistance of sugar burning and everything else. But it starts with what I just explained to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of experienced this in my last prep where there was just like, there were months that I just, really plateaued with my weight. It was very stagnant. I looked at my blood work, my H1C or my A1C was like borderline high. And it was like, once I started pulling back and stopped waking up at like 3:30 in the morning and trying to train and like do like crazy cardio, started focusing on rest. It was crazy how just that switch of just 3 pounds a week almost that I was losing and
Yeah.
um was finally able to lean out. So I would say I'm perimenopause and I mean I'm just one person, but when it
Yep.
comes to those kind of like populations, what would be some advice that you would have for them? And are they different than competitors or
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are
I mean, I
older
think
versus younger?
it gets a little bit in that, if you're someone who's lived a healthy lifestyle all your life, you've built a lot of muscle onto your frame and you go into menopause, you're going to hit that way easier than someone who sat on their couch all their life. They've got extra pounds on them already. They've not built muscle. So,
Hmm.
if you've lived a good lifestyle, I see women kind of breeze through it. Maybe they need a few tweaks, maybe they don't recover as well as they used to, but it's pretty easy. The women I get are usually the women that didn't really do dedication to a lifestyle. Maybe they trained here and there. Maybe they ate good here and there. They've had a lot of
Uh-huh.
periods of under eating and they hit menopause and it's just a complete mess. And so, when you get into that perimenopause, menopause area, hormones are fluctuating. They're doing some wonky things. You have huge fluctuations in your progesterone and estrogen, and so all these things can actually mimic autoimmune conditions. So when estrogen tanks or starts to drop, when you have a big swing in estrogen, that's when we can see more autoimmune conditions kind of rear their ugly head. And even if that doesn't happen and you don't have autoimmune, you start to see like hair thinning, weight around the midsection, brain fog, can't lose weight, weird rashes, bad digestion. It's all very similar to an autoimmune feel, even though they don't have that, but it's from that hormonal swing and change. And the less muscle they've built on their body and stayed lean through life, the harder this situation is. And then you couple in usually they've been stressed, mothers, jobs, bills, and then, they have this high cortisol or they've had high cortisol and their body's just very much favoring that sugar over anything else. And we know when inflammation's kicked in, and that happens when that estrogen drops and swings,
Hmm.
inflammation kicks in, and you can basically the IL-6 raises and all these macrophages raise. You've got inflammation kicking, and so your body wants what? Sugars. When you're inflamed and your immune system kicking high, your body wants more of that sugar. So it just fuels that whole process that's already kind of going. So we got to really work the case from resting them, working down inflammation, and feeding them back up, and then dealing with all the issues on the labs. If you don't have good hormonal health and you've got all these other issues from not really doing the right things all your life, it's really an uphill battle and it can be unwound, but you're probably going to need a coach to coach you through it. It's going to be
Yeah.
very difficult to listen to a podcast and have me say a few of these things and
Right.
just solve it. You're going to kind of start to understand a few things you're seeing and go, hey, he doesn't even know me and he just explained me. But it's very hard to piece it all together because it's got to be really reverse engineered from the beginning, where we start with lowering inflammation, fixing the gut, fixing the hormones, and doing all those things as we walk through the case.
What are some tests that you do? Do you do just like a basic metabolic blood panel or what are some tests that
Good
you
question.
run? Do you do Dutch or?
I get contacted mostly by a lot of women who, their bodies are kind of failing them right now. They're not, doing what they are used to doing,
Yeah.
whereas eat less and move more, and it used to work.
Hmm.
So when people come in the door, because I do get a lot of functional issue cases, I have a whole process that I teach in my university to make sure that I don't put someone right into a fat loss phase or right into a muscle building phase if they are dysfunction. So I have a metabolic stress questionnaire they fill out that lets me know how the 12 systems of your body are functioning together. And then this kind of tells me what labs I might need to see. I have a full gut assessment form that, tells me how your enzymes might be. Do you have SIBO? Do you have IBS? Different things that you can check that might, that might tell me that I need to look at certain things. And then I have a weight loss resistance form where I've seen these certain 15 to 18 characteristics. And if you had about 6, 7, 8 of those, probably going to give me a little trouble. And so I put all this together. And then from there, I have a panel I've created with my advanced vitality. For women, it's 235. For men, it's 200. To get the same
Okay.
panel at private MD, you probably pay $700.
Yeah.
Our buying power is very good. And so, yes, from there, I have a base panel. And then what I see on their paperwork, I might have to add a few other things. And then go from there and say, hey, the price is usually 235, but I need to see your homocysteine, or I need to add a few other things, and it's going to go up. But yes, I have a base panel that I do look at. I mean, I can tell you it if that's what you want. I don't mind sharing that, but it'll take a minute to rattle it off. But I do have that process in the door, so I know what I'm dealing with. Because the worst thing you want to
Right.
do as a coach is bring someone in and say, yeah, hey, great, we'll go right into that fat loss phase, and they're not healthy. And then 10 weeks later, you're like, sorry, I guess we got to kind of do this and and sorry, you've gained 15 pounds. I feel bad for you, my bad. And you see coaches have that happen to them all the time. They'll start 10 and 15 carbon people where their body's not in a spot to only be having a little bit added to them.
Yeah.
They usually gain weight. And so there's a lot of things that you got to look at and set up right to not ruin that client who's in that position. So I have a whole process of reviewing it.
So are you able to take through your hormone clinic, can you take pretty much all states, out of state, online
We
telehealth type
literally have
stuff? Or
our doctor literally got licensed in every single state for our
okay,
clinic.
nice. Do you do any tests for the gut, like GI mapping or
Oh
anything
yeah,
like
we
that?
can offer all that.
Okay.
So again, my forms will tell me if I think someone needs that.
Okay.
Most of my clients have gut impairment. And when I was first getting into functional, usually if I saw the first sign of gut issues, I'd say, let's get a GI map, but they're $450. Now I've got a position where I can flush out the body, put them on the right foods, get the body cranking, get the thyroid cranking again, get lipopolysaccharides out by binding to it. And I can get the gut to a position where usually probably 60% of the time they don't even need a GI map. They just need the right foods and a few things done properly, getting thyroid going again, kind of cranking on the endocrine system. And after that, they come out and they're fine. Now, after I flush them for 14 days, if they're not doing better, still not pooping, or they still have diarrhea, or they still have bloated, bad gas, then I look at a GI map, because you always fix the gut first. That's like your first big thing that you want to take care of before you work anything else on the case. So we offer that through the clinic. We have GI maps, we have ZRT testing, MRT testing if you want to see food sensitivities. We offer all that.
Can you explain the ZRT? I've not heard of that, I don't
Yeah,
think.
ZRT is you can test your hormones. It's a saliva test.
Oh,
And you can
okay.
test your
Okay.
hormones that way, but it's not as accurate. That's
Okay.
why the Dutch part of the Dutch, that I don't really rely on their hormone part. I love all their other things that they offer, um,
Cortisol.
but they have a 4-point cortisol, and cortisol through saliva is very
Very
reliant.
accurate.
And so you can get that 4-point cortisol test. So I can, if I'm hearing a lot of things about tired, dizzy when I stand up, can't sleep at night, I'm starting to think, there's an HPTA issue here. So I want to take a look at their adrenals. So I might have a ZRT tapped on to my usual functional panel, and then that'll give me an idea what their circadian rhythm, their cortisol curve is looking like, and then I can go in and help that if I need to.
Can you just briefly explain what the HPA axis is and
It's your
also,
adrenals and how it attaches to your pituitary gland in your brain, and how all that axis works. So it's your adrenal system, how it communicates with your brain into your adrenals.
and so when that is dysfunctional and when you're looking at a saliva test, what exactly are you kind of like looking for and
Yeah,
all that?
so I mean, your cortisol is comes from the adrenal glands, right? So that's
Right.
part of a hormone, a part of the HPTA axis. You want your cortisol to spike in the morning and then naturally do this throughout the day. So
Mhm.
as you get into the evening, it should come down. It spikes to wake us up and then it comes down. But I mean, some people spike and then they just stay high, or some people are completely flopped. They get up in the morning and it's super low, and then they spike at night, so they can't sleep. So you got to fix all these things before you would push on the body to even build muscle or cut them, or else you're going to make this dysfunction worse and worse and worse and worse. And people do that to themselves all the time.
Yeah. Lee, did you have any thoughts on any of that stuff that he just talked about there?
So I kind of have just a general question. All of this stuff that you're talking about, like very specifically, how does it relate to when we're competing in an extreme sport like bodybuilding? Let's say you have, like, I've worked with a lot of athletes and then I compete myself. And
Mhm.
so even just seeing the different types of preps and how some people seem to be able to get very lean on a lot higher calories, a lot lower cardio, versus some people just seem to have to go very low in calories, especially near the end, and very high in cardio. And just the methods that we have to take to get stage lean can sometimes mimic a lot of the side effects or the effects that you're talking about, with like, being dizzy when you stand up or having a hard time sleeping and things. And if you have an athlete that maybe had normal hormone levels when they started prepping with you, what are the signs that you're concerned about their hormones and they need to go into maybe like a reverse or recovery phase and work through that, versus it just being a tough prep and an extreme dieting phase?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. As a coach, you should always be collecting biofeedback like you're talking about throughout a prep.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, technically speaking, you should be able to get someone pretty close to the end without, them having to be wide awake all night and not sleeping well. If that happens, I always pull back. I take out hit, I take out miss, I do more lists, and I up their carbs. Maybe I got to lower their protein to do it. And a lot of times they drop more. That takes them out of mTOR by lowering protein, or at least lowers it. They can, go through autophagy a little bit, clean out some senescent cells. Maybe it, brings cortisol down a bit. I can hit them with Cortis, which is one of the products from my supplement company. So if I'm seeing biofeedback off, I'm going to act. I'm not going to just keep saying, well, that's part of prep, suffer through it, which is what probably earlier 10 years ago, a lot of us just said. I'm going to adjust. Like I said, pull and hit is great. Pull and miss is great. I will have them walking more food. I might bring in a few supplement interventions, but also like if your gut starts to go bad, like let's say, they're pooping great when they go into prep. And then now it's like once every 3 days, once every 4 days. That's not normal. That's not good. It's going to affect things. I'm going to pull back again. Sleep. If you're not sleeping well, especially as a female, good luck to your fat loss. Men seem to be able to fudge through this a little bit better, but if your sleep is off, you're not going to drop anyway. So I'm going to fix it. All these biofeedback markers coaches should be looking for, and it's not just the answer of tough shit, push through it. If you have to push the show back, do it in order to give them a little bit of a break. But a lot of times when the body starts fighting me, if I drop their protein and up their carbs and maybe even bring their fat down just a bit, I get them dropping again. And it's because aldosterone comes lower, cortisol comes down. I might hit them with our Cortis throughout the day, ashwagandha, and I'm walking them. And it might be an hour and a half of walking, but it's easy as shit. I'm like a 3 on a treadmill. It's nothing. And that little bit of push up of the carbs brings the thyroid conversion back, gives them more serotonin. They kind of relax. They start sleeping better. And then I push forward from there and just start bringing carbs down further as I need. And if I need to put hit back in for a bit, I can push and pull. But really, you should be walking the athlete up to the edge, but never letting them fall over. And so when I have people that are already dysfunction that I fix who want to prep, as a rule of thumb, I always make them prep longer, and they're going to walk up to the edge. And as soon as I feel them there, they're going to rest for a week. And then I'm going to walk them up again and then rest a week. So it might be 4 weeks of push, 1 week pullback, 4 weeks push, 1 week pullback. Maybe they're a little more resilient and they get to push for 5 and then a week pullback. And like I said, in a week pullback, I'm usually hitting them with Cortis every 4 to 5 hours, ashwagandha. They're walking as our only form of cardio, training reps and sets come down, and carbs go up. And, that usually helps reset the body. And then I push forward from there. But yeah, those are a lot of the main markers you should be looking for. And if they're going wonky, that's not the direction to keep pushing forward. You need to address it and fix it, and then move forward.
Yeah. Can you explain to our listeners what your Cordy's has in it or what makes it
Yeah, sure.
effective? Okay.
So it's got phosphatidylserine in it, which helps metabolize cortisol. It also has some adaptogenic herbs in it, like rhodiola, ashwagandha, and those help your body cope with the stress it's under better. So whether you're high cortisol or very low cortisol, adaptogens help you deal with the stress so you can fix those things. So it's an adaptogenic product plus a metabolizer of cortisol that is too high. Now, if I suspect someone's insufficient, I might use our Adrena Health, which has more vitamin C and glandulars to help boost up the cortisol. But usually in prep, as long as they went in healthy, you're dealing with high. So usually it's our
Yeah.
Cordy's, ashwagandhas, pulling back, and that'll help kind of bring it back down.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Just if they're having trouble like waking up in the morning. So basically, they're just not really producing like a lot of cortisol, where they're
Yeah.
past that whole
If they
point.
stand up and they're dizzy, their adrenals are low.
Yeah.
Um, that's a telltale sign of just adrenal insufficient. And so I usually bring in some Adrena Health, a lot of vitamin C, and then give them a little bit of a pullback. As a coach, you should really assume these things are going to happen and diet your clients to the point where you built in time to have these weeks where you're probably going to miss. But honestly speaking, even when you pull back, you should really still be able to progress. You just have to program it right.
Yeah, I've noticed when I pull back, sometimes my clients they just drop tons of weight and
Yep.
their
Yep.
waist gets
It was much
tighter.
better.
I have somebody that I can think of right now about that. As far as mending the adrenals naturally,
Mhm.
outside of the supplements, what are some other key tips that we could do to promote
Sure.
adrenal health and
There's
things
a
like that?
lot. So, early to bed for sure. Got to get more sleep. Assess your lifestyle habits in terms of like, what's your work like? I mean, are you getting right out of bed and rushing to work? Is there a way to address your schedule? Can you unload anything to other people? Can you ask your spouse to do a few more things? Do you journal? Does that help? Some people love that and it gets their thoughts out. Some people will sit at night and think about all the things they have to do the next day. That's kind of me. So now I just get into my notes on my phone and I write it down and my brain can kind of just let it go. And so then I can get to sleep. I like using like blue light glasses at night for people who struggle to kind of chill out. I think
Mhm.
that's really helpful. And then, go get a massage. I always tell my people go to massage or a float tank. If you've never floated, it's amazing. It puts you in parasympathetic so quickly. And most metropolitan areas have a float tank. And you just get in this little pod and it just takes away all the heaviness and stress. And
Oh
those are
wow.
amazing to put you right back into a parasympathetic state. So I think journaling, sleep, talking to your spouse or your support system, float tank or like a Swedish massage. I'm not talking like deep tissue where you're getting killed. I'm talking about like just chill out and mellow out. I think all those things are the natural ways to handle it. And then the supplements are just a way to kind of get it there quicker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So did you have any other questions, Lee, about adrenals or like cortisol before we move on to? Because I wanted to try to get into a little bit of the GLP,
Yeah.
tirzepatide and
Okay.
semaglutide differences.
Just one really quick
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
fun question. Tell me what your opinions are on caffeine.
Oh, okay.
That-
So I think personally, or my personal intake, my take on it is you can have a cup a day. And so maybe you're getting 100 mgs or less. If you need more than that to survive, you have some sort of adrenal dysfunction. And so one of my first things I do with functional clients, I put them through the flush. It's a Mediterranean style diet, lower protein, more carbs, more veggies, fruits, healthy oils, and our Metapure and Optapure to crank the whole system. I
Mhm.
take caffeine from them. And the worse their headaches, the more they're addicted and the more their adrenals are screwed. And I think women really should watch it because it can affect the liver and detox of estrogen throughout your body by just pounding tons of caffeine. And I find that women who are addicted to it and using it through their day, 500 mgs, 600 mgs, have more issues with estrogen buildup and detoxification. So 1 cup a day, healthy, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you're reaching for the pot all day, switch to decaf. That's what I do. I love the way coffee tastes. So I do one caffeinated, and then the rest of the day, if I want one, it's just decaf.
Mm-hmm.
And, that way I'm never addicted to it. I could literally skip. I've actually been skipping my morning ones for chamomile tea because there's no caffeine and it's great for cortisol. I've been feeling just a little more stressed with business and stuff. All good things, but still it's a stress. And so I skipped it and my body doesn't, I don't get headaches. I don't feel it. So I think we just want to stay away from reliance. I'm not a big fan of energy drinks that are really heavy into caffeine. You do not need 300 mgs of caffeine in one sitting. That's really crazy. And what you're doing is just you realize that norepinephrine I told you about and that epinephrine, you're spiking it. And so that's signaling to your body to dump sugars. And so, yeah, you get a jolt of energy, but you're also potentially getting that system going to the point where, your body's relying on that and you're just spiking your insulin, so you're causing stress and spiking your insulin. So that's kind of my take on it. And then like pre-workouts, I like keto salts. Those work great. We have it in our product, but there's a ton of products on the market. That will give you a nice steady energy burn and focus rather than stimming yourself out and really killing your adrenals. And
Mm-hmm.
then it makes it tough to eat afterwards a lot of times if you're stimmed out. So
Mm-hmm.
So when you're recommending the 100 mgs, since your cortisol does spike when you first wake up, would you
mhm.
recommend having it a little bit later in the morning when you're like,
The ideal spot would be to eat
yeah,
first and then have it. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So not
Yeah.
just have
Having it in
it
the
first
morning is
thing in the
not.
morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So really, like, if you're going to IMF fast and then maybe have your meal around 11, that'd probably be the best time to have it rather than on that empty stomach, ideally.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah. So I was seeing that you have used some, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, but terzepatide. You've used that in your last prep.
Yep.
Can you give us a little bit about what that's done for you,
Yep.
your kind of testimonial in terms of how that helped you with your bodybuilding prep? And then, there's rumors about like how, at least semaglutide can, talk about the research when it comes to why people actually lose muscle when they're on those types
Yep.
of things,
100%.
and all that. So,
Sure. So first and foremost, semaglutide is a GLP-1.
mhm,
And so that's glucagon like peptide 1. And then tirzepatide is GLP-1 with GIP added. GIP is, let's see, glucose inhibitory polypeptide, I think. It's a lot of mouthful. And they both do similar things, but the GIP doesn't seem to have as much gastric slowdown.
mhm,
So tirzepatide, I find, doesn't blunt appetite quite as much, which is why I like it. It definitely takes the food noise away. But the more GLP-1 you have loaded into the dose, the more that you get that where you can't eat or you really don't want to eat.
mhm,
So you got to know yourself. Like if you're a bottomless pit, maybe the semaglutide is your go-to. If you're someone who already isn't super hungry, but you're using it to bring down your A1C, using it to help while you're working cortisol, because we know if glucagon signaling, you're not going to be losing much fat. And we'll talk about what these things do. So first and foremost, one of the reasons they shine, especially I've saved so many people's preps whose bodies aren't moving by microdosing these. And why? Think about it. If your stress is up, what did I tell you in the beginning of the episode? Your glucagon is signaling. You're dumping sugars constantly. Well, what do these do? They bring down glucagon. So your insulin can do what? Signal upon eating. And what does that do? Clear sugars. What does that do? Brings inflammation down.
mhm.
I put a lot of autoimmune conditions in remission using these. Rheumatoid
Wow.
arthritis, colitis. You got to microdose it because colitis has bathroom issues. But if you Google these drugs, there's a lot of good literature on autoimmune conditions too, because they lower inflammation so much because most of us have a metabolic chink in our machinery. So they're not just out there, oh, well, you're taking the cheater way. You're just doing that so you're not hungry, you don't eat. That's not the way to think about these things. You got to understand what they're really doing. They're helping a very stressed population get that blood sugar cleared instead of just continually staying circulating. Now, they do slow digestion down, right? And they
Right.
do help with hunger. I'm not saying they don't, but there's a lot more at play here. Now, the reason they get a bad rap is because there was one study and they studied a population that did not weight train and they only ate 500 calories. And so they lost 40% of their weight from muscle and 60% from fat. Okay. So
Okay.
then everyone jumps on the bandwagon that these are so terrible. Now, I'll tell you what, if I put someone on 500 calories and they could stand it and do nothing, they're going to lose the same amount of muscle anyways. It's not the medicine, it's how it's wielded, it's how it's used.
Yeah.
So that's first and foremost. Number two, I personally will not put someone on this until we've worked the case. You've proven to me you will drink your water, you will get to bed, you will show up for yourself at least 3 days a week and weight train. You'll show up for yourself and eat right. If I still can't get you losing weight, I've fixed everything on labs. We've done everything we can to invest into you, and your still body isn't working. There's probably definitely a metabolic issue. Maybe your insulin isn't signaling right, which I see a lot, especially people that have dieted or had eating disorders. Their insulin is not signaling right. I see insulins on the low end at 2, 1.5s, and their A1Cs are sky high. Well, it's because the insulin is done. It's not signaling anymore. And so these things can really overcome a lot of issues for people, but you have to prove to me, number one, you're willing to invest in solving the problem without. And then if we can't, then we can use some intervention. Now, why did I elect to use it? Well, number one, in February, I got shingles. I'm a really healthy guy, but my stress got to me. So I had to readjust my lifestyle. I had to take less clients. I had to hire more people inside my companies, and I did all that. But my insulin was still 16. That's very
Oh,
high,
yeah.
who's lean and in shape. Well, that's metabolic dysfunction. And my A1C was 5.6. That's not great. It's not you're dying tomorrow, but it's not great. It's metabolic stress. And so for me, I just wanted to get that down while I worked on the stress, but it wasn't coming down as fast as I wanted because of the constant stress, right?
Mhm.
Glucagon up, constantly dumping sugars. I'm trying my best, but it's just not getting done. So I went on these literally just to fix that. And I was so scared of losing muscle that I just microdosed it. So what I did was tirzepatide dosing is usually 25 units. This is the lowest medical dose, and that is 2.5 mgs. Well, I'm like, I'm scared. I don't really want to lose muscle. I'm a pretty healthy guy. So I just did 10 units, which is about a milligram, one mg. And I split it 5 units on Monday, 5 minutes on Thursday, because I didn't want to not be able to eat. So after 6 weeks, my fasted insulin was a 6, and my A1C was a 5.1. That's
Wow.
amazing. And my fasted glucose was like 89. It was like 115 or something when I took the prior lab. And I was leaner and bigger. And I didn't alter my HRT or anything. So then it got me thinking, all right, well, these obviously don't make you lose muscle. And in fact, I need to dig in deeper and really know what's going on here. How did I gain muscle? Well, I didn't tell you this part yet, but they push autophagy. And if you don't know what autophagy is, that's cellular cleansing. That's where we go in and we chew up senescent cells at the mitochondrial level that are either, not performing well. They don't die, but we call them zombie. And this is how we age. Cells break down from inflammation. They become senescent, DNA damage. Then we get cancer. Then we get Parkinson's. Then we get dementia. So anything that pushes autophagy is getting those old cells out to make new. Well, those new cells have hormone receptors on it. I was like, I can feel my TRT. I'm pumped more. I'm big. I'm stronger. Well, it's because that autophagy pushing too was bringing in new cells that had new hormone receptors. So all my things are being heard. And I had to start Nature Thyroid NP not maybe about a year prior.
Okay.
And I'm noticing that I'm like hotter and I feel almost a little anxious. Well, I took my labs and I was high. And that's because that dose now was doing more for me because these new cells and the new hormones. My testosterone had gone up. So all this stuff did was reset my cells. It gave my beta cells a rest because they don't have to constantly keep dumping insulin now because of all the sugar I'm pushing in for my stress. So my pancreas is more healthy. The beta cells are more healthy, which produce insulin. And I'm in a less inflamed state. Of course, I gain more muscle. So then I'm like, I could probably use this for a bodybuilding show, but I'm not going to do it on one of my clients. I'm going to do it. So I had 7 weeks to the Tampa, and my wife was already doing it. And I just hopped in. We just got done from vacation. I finished my last pizza with the kids and ice cream and started dieting. And I got peeled. I was never hungry. I never had anger issues because I was never hangry. It was the easiest diet I've ever done in my life. I never had to do HIIT. I never had to do miss. So my CNS stayed healthier. All I had to do was walk and train my ass off. And, people can say what they want, but if you can do that and not have to do HIIT and not have to go to absurd, I never got under 200 carbs, you're going to be healthier coming out of your prep.
Mm-hmm.
And I gained muscle all the way into that prep. I wasn't bodybuilding. I was going to the gym, but I wasn't trained to be a bodybuilder anymore, and I wasn't planned to ever compete again. But once I started seeing these things, I had to test it. And my hypothesis was right. You can actually, you'll build muscle faster on these things if you microdose it and set your dose right and can eat and get all the things done because of all the benefits it has on your body. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is they're being abused at too high a doses, causing gastroparesis, and people are starting them when they aren't healthy. If you give this to someone who already isn't pooping, like a lot of menopausal women, of course it's going to get worse. And of course she's going to end up with gastroparesis. And she's so inflamed that she's going to need a super high dose. But if you come to me first and I fix all those issues and then I put a micro dose in, now you're gaining muscle and now you're rebuilding your body. And now you're thwarting disease later in the future because we know all disease starts with inflammation. I just explained that at the cellular level. So these drugs
Yeah.
are very powerful and could. I'm actually shocked that more people walking around because I live in Kentucky. It's a very obese state.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that more people aren't getting on these and doing the right work. But no, everyone wants to just starve themselves and do nothing, I guess. But this could literally change the obesity crisis in America, in my opinion, if done right. So I'll stop now, and that's kind of my soapbox. And you guys can ask me any questions you have.
Yeah, I love it. Lee, why don't you ask a question if you have one, or do you?
Um, Boy, that was a lot. I love that.
I
Do
know.
you, now that you've done it on yourself,
Mhm.
have you started using it with athletes
Oh
or?
God, yeah. They're coming to me in droves. Like they're like, oh, my body's not behaving well. I
Uh-huh.
had a guy come to me, he's 49, the IFBB pro. His prep didn't go well. He was with a solid coach, but he had metabolic issues. So we
Yeah.
microdosed tirzepatide. I put him on a little NAD plus, which helps at the cellular level integrity. Put him on a little methylene blue that lowers oxidative stress. More peeled than he's ever been in his life. All of his years competing, he's more peeled. I had another female come to me again with a very well-known coach. She had only lost about 12 pounds in about 8 months.
Hmm.
I got her at 5 weeks. We lost 10 pounds in 5 weeks, and she got her pro card. So now she's with me. I got another guy that I've competed with in the past in the IFBB ranks. He reached out. He's looking phenomenal. I just shared him on my stories today. We're microdosing it. His body is behaving like it never has before. Very, very small dose, just like 5 to 10 units sprinkled here and there. So yeah, once I tested on myself and knew my hypothesis was right, yeah, when people come to me, I have no problem walking them through it and how to do it right. But a lot of those are obviously people that already know how to train, know how to eat right, right? So I don't have to worry about them, just relying on this medication and they lose all this muscle. And then when they come off of it, they're in a worse state, right? So we
Hmm.
always have to get that training piece, all those habits down so that they're actually building muscle and not losing it, especially on the way up. When I reverse the dose and bring the food back up, they can really start to grow because they have those habits in. And then if they want off the medication, they can do that because now they have more muscle, they have a better BMR than when they started, and they're eating more food. So,
How do you transition, and have you transitioned yet to go off of it since your show? I can't.
yep,
You
I'm 7 weeks off the
okay?
show, and I didn't take any more dosing after the show, so I've been off 7 weeks. I just got my labs done. A1C is 4.9, so that's an average glucose of
Oh,
88. My fasted insulin's now 4.9, and my fasted glucose was 86. My inflammation CRP was 0.1. Um, and I think those are the major markers that you would be curious about in terms of like that type of metabolic
yeah.
medication. So I haven't gone back on. I'm still staying really lean, and it really is. If you keep the habits and keep eating well, I find that it's like a metabolic reset. Now,
Okay.
people that are very dysfunctioned in menopause and they haven't lived a healthy life, I find that they might do better on a microdose and holding that there, or either
Hmm.
transitioning off to a metformin for a while and then back on if they want. So like an 8 and 8, because metformin will hold that sensitivity we've rebuilt. But yeah, so to taper off, what I do is, let's say you're using tirzepatide and you get up to 100 units, something like that. Because you use 25 units and maybe every 4 weeks you bump it if you need to. And I'm a big proponent, don't bump it if you're getting results.
Yeah.
Our clinic will tell people that, like, here's what usually the dosing is, but if you're getting results, don't bump it. But let's say you got up to 100 units. Well, I would back that down as I bring food up. So maybe we back off 20 units every 2 to 3 weeks, and every check-in, as long as they're doing okay, I'm up in food. I'm bringing
Okay.
carbs up. I'm bringing protein up. My goal is to get most women to 19 to 2100 before we would get to that micro dose level or that lowest medical dose back to 25 units or even 12 and a half if we want to half it.
Yeah.
And we have the discussion. Listen, let's, you were 55 when you came to me, you had 30, 40 pounds to lose. My guess is you might do the best kind of staying on a microdose of 10 units. We can try to come off. What do you want to do? And some say, I'd like to come off. Okay. Do you want to try metformin or just come off completely? Some want to just come off completely. I'd say about 80% of them do really well. There are some that you can see that like there's still some dysfunction starting to creep back in. And we can
Mhm.
either fast them every week to push autophagy and reset blood sugars. We can have keto off days, which will help as well. But if they don't want to do all that, then maybe they need to stay on a microdose to keep that sensitivity going.
Mhm.
But there's ways to do that. But the younger you are, I used it on a young girl who had eating disorder issues, and I made her get all her habits down, but her body still wasn't really performing well for us. It was an insulin firing thing. She had kept it so low so long that when she eat, her insulin didn't want to fire, and that's what this helps do. So
Okay.
we used it for a stint of 8 weeks. She's now eating probably 2,300 calories, and she's still at 113 and building muscle. So she hasn't needed it at all. And I think that's because she's so young. It was like a metabolic reset for her, and she was
Hmm.
great. The older you are and the more dysfunction you were, I think you might need to keep a microdose in or some sort of metformin. But yeah, you walk the dose down as you walk the calories back up.
Okay. Was there like is there a set amount of time that it's like, okay, after this many months or whatever, do you have to go
Usually
off
we
of
just go
it
by
or?
look and feel like, every once in a while a client will, get to the point where they've never seen their body this lean and they want to keep going. And I'm like, listen, you're not a bodybuilder. You're not a competitor. This level of leanness isn't something you should even maintain. You're good. We need to work up. Let's get this going. But there isn't really a time frame per se. I mean, everyone's different, and everyone has different amount of weights to lose. I've had people that
Sure.
have metabolic dysfunction and they only have about 15 pounds to get off, but other people I've taken almost 70 off. So that's going to take a little longer. And then the reverse is a little bit longer because the doses are higher, right? And plus, I got to get the
Right.
food back up. There's one thing you should really keep in mind too, when you're reversing. Anytime you put the body under stress and you're dieting, SHBG goes up, and that's sex hormone binding globulin. And you want this like middle, like 50, 60. You don't want it too low because then you're not getting the hormones around the body. And you don't want it too high because then it binds up your hormones. Well, it's not uncommon when you diet for this to and be in the hundreds for women. And what happens is that's going to bind up their testosterone. So when you start the reverse, if you don't bring this down, their androgens aren't in a good spot and you're going to gain more fat. And that's where people mess up reverse diets a lot. So there's ways to bring that down. Naturally, you can bring it down with boron and just make a slower transition. You can use a SARM called cardarine, which is really a SERM. It's really an
Mhm.
anti-inflammatory. It's good for fat loss. It's not going to have anabolic properties, but it brings that SHBG down pretty quick so that you at least get your natural androgens free. Or the controversial one is you can use 2.5 mgs of Anavar. And that's going to bring that SHBG down really quickly, but allow them to build muscle at a faster rate on the way up so that when they get to the end, their BMR is higher. And you'd be surprised how many house women who have just been house moms or whatever are like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I want to look bomb. And so we do that with them. There's no androgen side effects at 2.5, and we only do it for 8 weeks, but they put on a lot of nice muscle, and that just sets them up for afterwards to be in a much better spot with a higher BMR. But there's ways to counter that. Like I said, boron's natural, cartarine's kind of in the middle, and then you've got your Anavar, and we script it,
Mhm.
right? So I mean, they're being watched, and their labs are being watched, and it's farm grade. But sometimes that's controversial to people, and so but no matter what, as a coach, you got to be cognizant of that. After you've dieted them, that SHBG is going to be high. So if you want the best results, you need to manage that so that their androgens are free to build some muscle on the way up.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is there's not like a limit, like, okay, you cannot take this medicine, you cannot be on this for like six
No,
months
I mean, there's
or a
people that stay on
year
it
or
forever. I mean, there's people that don't
okay.
change their habits, right? And they use it as the crutch, right? That's
Yeah,
America. So
unfortunately.
it's designed to be on indefinitely.
Okay.
I think number one, that's a bad idea because of hormesis. Your body actually gets used to every medication. And so what happens if you're at the max dose and then it stops working? What do you do? But if you work yourself back down, you work your calories up, now you've got these great habits. Number one, it shouldn't ever need to go back up higher. Or you can get off, and then let's say you slip up, right? Like life happens, and they put on 15 pounds. They can always go back on it and then get back off again. But if they don't know how to do that and you don't empower them and show them that through coaching, they either might think they have to stay at that highest dose because they're scared as hell to come down. They don't have to.
Okay.
But you never want to, I think, stay at that highest dose. You want to get them down, get the food up, and that way you got more runway in case you need it ever again.
Yeah. Well, this has just all been gold. I've really appreciated you coming on. Is there anything that you wanted to share with our listeners before we hop off? Maybe that a question that we didn't ask you that you just felt like would be helpful.
Let's see. I think one of the pieces that someone should know how to do if they're going to try to kind of look at their metabolic health, obviously check your fasted insulin. Doctors are not going to do this. You're going to have to request it or come to like my clinic or get a coach. You
Hmm.
want to look at your A1C. That's the second most important, and the least important is your fasted glucose.
Okay.
Fasted glucose is not that important. I've seen people with 110 and then their A1C is 4.9 and their fasted insulin's great. That's called Dawn phenomenon. That's a cortisol
Right.
issue. And you might, have to worry about, what your night routine is, maybe even need a meal before you go to bed with some carbs in it, et cetera. But that's not something to rely on. You've got to look at your fasted insulin. That's your biggest one. I've
Okay.
even seen people with 5.2s on their A1C, which is a great number, and their fasted insulin's 20. Well, what's going on there? They're losing sensitivity. They're just cranking so much insulin to shove the carbs into the cell. Eventually, the gland will tire out and stop firing, like we talked about, and then you see that A1C skyrocket. Okay. So you got to look at your insulin. You want to be under 10, ideally between, I'd say 2.5 and 8 is ideal. Um, and then another piece to take this one step further, you can get what's called a keto mojo. And this allows you to take your glucose at home and your ketones. And so, again, this tells me how you metabolize your food. What I'm looking at here is where's your glucose at 2.5 to 3 hours after you eat? And it should be
That's great.
under 90. And then where are your ketones at 3 hours after you eat? Fat burns in the flame of the carb, meaning a metabolically flexible metabolism can burn glycogen and fat. If you're stuck as a sugar burner, your ketones are going to say 0.1 or low on that machine. Now you know you've got inflammation and it's being fed, probably high cortisol, glucagon signaling. It's being fed constantly, and your cells can't burn fat. If it's healthy, it should be 0.3 or 0.4, somewhere around there, even eating a glycogen diet. Now, to see if you're in ketosis, you would need to be above a 0.5 on that meter. And then above 1 is really fat adapted, meaning your body is running on fat.
Okay.
So if you don't have those numbers, you're metabolically impaired in some way. So those are things that I use as a coach to kind of guide and figure out, do I need fasting? Do I need intermittent fasting? Do I have to do some fast mimicking dieting? Do I need a ketogenic diet? Do I need a whole food plant-based diet to fix these things, especially if someone doesn't want to use these drugs? You can fix all this. It takes a lot longer, and there's going to be fasting. There's going to be keto. And you're going to be hungry. And some people don't want to go that route. And so then I have the other route.
What did you say the device was, and how do we get
Keto
that?
Mojo.
Keto Mojo.
Yeah.
Is it just like something that you can basically
You can
order
buy
on
it on
Amazon?
Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Lee, that you had before we hop off? Can you let us know how we can,
Yeah.
if listeners
So
want to reach
anyone
out to
out
you
there
or
who is interested in these principles, you might want to join my Scuba U cohort. It's just $50 a month. There's about 90 coaches in there. I answer questions on their daily via Loom. So they drop their questions. I got a client and they're this is that, their blood work, and they're not dropping. What's going on? How do I do it? And I get on there and troubleshoot. And then, if they're interested in my school, we've got that as well. They can get all these through my page. And I've got a course right now. It's 15 modules long. It's on Kartra. You do self-study and you learn my systems and how I kind of attack these cases.
okay.
And my Instagram is Jason Theobald _, Scooby Health. And you can hit me up in a DM there and I can get you all the links to anything. And then if you're interested in HRT or need labs or any of that, you can go to advancedvitalityhrt.com and contact us through there or me, and I'll walk you into my coordinators and they'll take care of you.
Perfect. And you can find us on Instagram at Prep Life Podcast or at Glam Girl Bikini. And please feel free to tag Jason on the story and let him know what you thought of this episode. We really appreciate your time so
For sure.
much. Thanks for listening, guys.